are now live.
Okay.
Hey, welcome everybody to the Ukiah Unified School Board special board meeting on April 20th, 2021. Let's start with a call to order and the roll call. Deb, you're frozen again, so maybe.
Debbie, you're frozen.
Oh,
It's funny, she's right on the other side of the wall and she's frozen with the same internet and everything.
She looks nice frozen right now.
She does look nice.
Yeah. She's still
well,
frozen.
when that happens, I'm going off and on. And
Okay.
we'll see if it
Okay.
if that helps. Yeah. But I'm here.
Yeah, you're good right now, B. You're not frozen.
Okay.
It's Debbie. Oh, there she comes. How weird. Now we can see her in both places.
That's a twin, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, Trustee Arkin,
Here.
Trustee Asbury,
Here.
Trustee Barrett,
Here.
Trustee Fernandez,
Here.
Trustee Mulgard,
Here.
Trustee Nelson,
Here.
and President Van Sant.
Here.
Okay, good deal. People get unfrozen.
All right.
Okay, now it's time for the flag salute. So we'll wait for the flag to come on the screen and we can stand and say the flag salute. Ooh, we've got a different kind of picture up. Ian, I'm going to give another minute to get the flag up, or shall we carry on? There we go. Okay, ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, this is a special meeting, so we will not address any items other than what are noticed on the special meeting. Can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Second.
Moved by Trustee Mulgard, seconded by Trustee Nelson. All those in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Okay, this is a notice. I am noticing the public that this is a special meeting pursuant to the Ralph M. Brown Act, and no business may be considered at a special meeting other than what is on the written agenda. And our first item is item B1, Board Communication in support of AB 839 for the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant. Ms. Dubin?
Megan, may I interrupt?
Oh, sure.
Can we mute the microphones? There's a little bit of echo going on.
Yeah, I kind of was wondering if it was me, but I don't know what.
I'm thinking it might be Debbie's computer. There we go.
No, it's still kind of there. That's very weird. I just muted mine and I can still hear that. We're all muted and I can still hear it. You know what? I think it's something to do with YouTube coming through. Oh, wait, Ian, did you fix something? It stopped, right?
It stopped and YouTube is muted. The stream is muted on as I'm monitoring it, so I don't think it's me.
Well, whatever you did stopped it. So maybe we'll carry on. Okay, I'm going to carry on. I hopefully won't come back. So we are on item B1, the board communication in support of AB 839. Superintendent Cuban, were you going to take this item?
I'm going to turn it over to Trustee Nelson, but just a quick background. We, at our last meeting, we had a wonderful presentation from Eric Crawford, our CTE coordinator, about our CTE program. And at that time, I shared with the board that there's an assembly bill in motion right now to increase career tech ed funding and to also stabilize it. So the board wanted us to bring this back so they could write a letter of support in that assembly bill. And Trustee Nelson very nicely took it to draft on, and this is a time for the board to give input. Trustee Nelson, did you want to say anything?
Yes, now that I'm prepared for it. As we know, funding for CTE is sometimes we have it and sometimes we don't. There is a bill, AB 839, that is currently in, Deb, I can't remember where it's at.
It's gone through the assembly and they're trying to get Senate support. And Senator McGuire is supporting this bill. He's trying to help co-author it. And then it would go, hopefully get Senate support and then get appropriated in the July 1st budget.
So it's not quite to the Senate yet. Anyhow, so I'm hoping that the board will think the letter is a good idea, so we can send it to our representatives at the state level to help secure long-term funding. There is another attached to the agenda. There's a letter from Peter Birdsall to the group that our superintendent has been meeting with. And in it are a number of items that I'm sure that you've already read, but I did want to highlight one thing, that our participation at the state level does have an impact. After speaking with Senator McGuire, our superintendent, Sonoma County superintendent, and Del Norte superintendent met with Senator McGuire. After that conversation, he was, as I understand it, really excited about supporting the bill and trying to be sponsored. Anything that we can do to secure long-term funding, I think, is important. And I think that's all I've got. I hope we support it. CTE is really important for our community. I just found out today that I can't get a washing machine serviced because we don't have enough service people out there. This might be some of the classes that we offer may encourage people to take that pathway. And that's what I've got for you.
Great, thank you, Trustee Nelson. Any comments from the board or questions? So I'm thinking that we would be making a motion to approve this letter and on behalf of the board. Superintendent Cuban, is that how we would do this?
Yes, unless you have any edits or anything like that. Yes.
Any edits? Trustee Mulgard?
I would prefer that the term young lady be struck and put young woman or student. Gentleman is to ladies as men is to women. So we just want to be consistent. And student solves the problem.
Okay, that seems like an easy fix.
Sounds good.
Any other edits or suggestions?
I have one question.
Oh, go ahead.
And I was just trying to drag this up. So currently it's in at the Appropriations Committee. And I'm wondering, and part of Mr. Birdsall's letter indicated that they're looking for senator support. So I'm wondering if this letter, if we decide to send this letter, how do we word it to send it to all the right people as opposed to just the Appropriations Committee or Senator McGuire?
I can do some research on that and ask Peter who he'd suggest we send it to. I know Senator McGuire is already in support of this bill. I think we should send it to him anyway, but I'll ask him who else. I was thinking our state superintendent of public instruction would be good, the governor's office, and then I'll find out from the financial side where it should go. They are really looking for Senate support right now, and because ours already supports it, that's awesome. I'll ask, if you don't mind, I'll ask Peter who else he would recommend. He's the executive director of the CTE Coalition, and he will know.
Sounds
Okay.
good. Let's go forward.
All right, Trustee, just one more comment or question from Trustee Mulgard.
I was just going to recommend that superintendent share it with her networks as well, because sometimes people don't have the time and a volunteer like our Trustee Nelson to draft the letter, but if they saw one already written, they could adapt it to their own senator rather quickly.
Absolutely.
Okay, can I have a motion to approve and send this letter? on behalf of the board?
Okay, I so move.
Moved by trustee Arkin, seconded by trustee Barrett. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anybody
Aye.
opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, great. Thank you. And thank you, Superintendent Cuban and trustee Nelson as well for making this happen.
That's great.
All right, let's move to item B2, the development of budget framework for COVID-19 related funds. This was a request of the board to have a special meeting specifically about the additional COVID-19 related funding, the considerable funding that the district has received, in recognition that this is an unusual opportunity, and it's also happening in the middle of a really difficult year. So if we can spend some time just concentrating on what the opportunities are before us and what kind of guidance and policy direction we can give to our administrative team so that they can move forward with making decisions in the best interest of our students. That's where we are. So I'll let Mr. Berkman, are you taking this item from the beginning?
Sure, I'd be happy to. All right, good evening and thank you. I'll get my screen share set up here. So I was thinking back to December of 19, which feels like about 100 years ago at this point, but it really wasn't that long ago. It was pre-pandemic. We were sitting on a general fund budget of about $80 million when we brought first interim to you in December of 2019. And if we would have sat down and tried to think of a scenario where we would have gotten 8 million, or roughly 10% of our budget, in one-time funds on top of our budget, I don't think we could have thought of a scenario that would have happened. And that was just the first round of funding we received. We now have 3 times that, another 25 million that we have received in the second round of funding that we need to figure out how to deal with. And so tonight we're going to talk to you about a framework that maybe we can work on establishing to help us figure out how to budget and manage these funds as we go forward, because it is an awfully big chunk of our budget, right? So, oops, okay. So this first chart kind of shows you what I'm calling the old funds. That initial 8 million we got are the funds that are highlighted in gray. And then the new money, the 25.1 million in the blue skies forever here, shading, this kind of gives you a sense of how much one-time money we're talking about. So in the last 15 months, we've gotten $33 million in quote unquote one-time funding to address the pandemic. For a district with an $80 million budget, that's a lot of money. Yeah, so you can see it's a variety of different funding sources, and most of it's federal, some of it's state. However we got it, it's a lot of money. And there's probably more on the horizon. We've talked about the American Jobs Act is the next big thing on President Biden's docket. And if that happens, we think that potentially could dwarf all of the money we've gotten so far. So it will be interesting.
Can I interrupt you to tell you how much I like this slide? It's I really appreciate how clearly it's all laid out. And when you see it in this form, it's even more money than I thought it was. So thank you for having so clearly laid out what we've gotten, what we've spent, and the deadlines on one page. It's really easy to read and understand.
Great, thank you. And I'll give a tip of the cap to Megan for that. She suggested we try to get it all on one page, and so we did. So any other questions before I go on? Okay. So the next slide is a slide we borrowed from the school services presentation, which was last Wednesday. And just another way of looking at how the timelines play out. And so you can kind of see how much money we have left in each of the pots and what the deadlines are. And so most of the money we have left, we have until August of 22 to spend with the expanded learning opportunity grant. And then ESSER 2, the 5.4 million, we have till September of 23. And the 12.7 million of ESSER 3, we have until September of 24. So yeah, and that's uncommitted at this point. The other funds have already been committed, spent or encumbered, or at least budgeted through board approvals and prior meetings. So another school services slide to say, okay, now that you know what the money is and the rules are, and in case you want to know more about the rules, there is an attachment in the board packet that kind of gives a little more detail on each of the funds. If you want a lot more, we can actually find the Government Act wording. If you really have trouble sleeping, we can give you the 400 or 500 pages on each act to read through. on how we can and can't spend it, but I like the school services summaries better personally. One of the things I really liked about this is they talk about how important it is to have a plan, and that if we don't, really one of three things can happen. We can overspend it, which with this much money seems hard to do, but I bet we could if we tried. Underspend it, which we certainly don't want to do. We don't want to get to a deadline and have funds unspent. To send any of this back with as many different ways as we can spend it would be really, really tragic, I think. So we don't want that to happen. And I like this last point because we've already experienced it here in the fiscal office quite a bit, is we do get these text messages and these emails saying, hey, I need another $5,000, or hey, can I have another $10,000 to do this? And they're all great ideas, but we don't want to be dealing with $5,000 and $10,000 questions, not when we're dealing with $25 million. So we want to figure out, how can we set up a framework? How can we empower our managers and our leaders so that we can go forward and not have the $5,000 text at 11 o'clock at night? So we took a shot at kind of putting together a high level a framework. So what we're saying is we want to use the one-time pandemic relief funds to create a recovery plan addressing the short-term and long-term needs of our students by accelerating learning. And by learning, we mean in-person learning. We want to get everybody back. By investing in our facilities, let's take some of this money, this one-time money, and let's fix our HVAC systems. Let's make sure that we have healthy learning environments for our kids. Let's get some shade structures up so kids can get outside a little more often and again, get fresh air and be out of the classrooms. Let's increase our general fund reserves where we can. One thing we know about the state economy is it's going great right now, but we know that's going to turn at some point. And if we can be ready for that so that we can weather it, we'll be much better off. And then we also need to set aside a little bit of this money because I have no idea what 18 months from now looks like. I don't know if any of us do, right? And so we want to probably not commit every penny of this right now, even though there may be more money in the future. We want to make sure that we've still got some funds left to address things we can't foresee.
Steve, can I hold for 1 second there? I just wanted to clarify for myself, the board, and the public. My understanding is that these funds cannot be committed to ongoing salary increases. Is there some specific language related to that?
That is correct. We cannot pay anybody's base salaries. Well, that's not quite true. We can't really pay existing staff's base salaries out of this money.
We can hire new people. We could hire new
people, correct? Or we could increase hours for paraprofessionals or bus drivers to help us deal with our response to the pandemic. Absolutely, but we can't just all of a sudden say, here, everybody gets a 10% raise out of this money, and that raise is ongoing and permanent. That we can't do with this money.
Okay, so just go ahead, Trustee Mulgard.
Along those lines, we have talked occasionally about the possibility of a bonus for those people who have a B clad. And because we know from our statistics that children of color are adversely affected even more than majority colored children, what could that be legal?
I think there is a nexus there that we could probably try to justify.
I mean, I understand you'd still, Steve, have to figure out how you're going to keep paying for it, of course.
Correct.
But sometimes it's good to get a 2 or 3 year start on something.
Absolutely, and that's some of the suggestions we have later on this evening are some things like, let's pilot something for 2 or 3 years, see if it really does make a difference, and then we'll have to figure out how to fund it out of the general fund once these one-time funds are gone. So that could be another option, absolutely. Okay. So kind of another graphic, try another way to illustrate what we're trying to do with our money. Learning acceleration is really at the heart of this. It's specific in the wording on a lot of this money, but even more important than that, it's what we know in our hearts is how we need to spend this money. Our kids have missed a lot the last 18 months. We need to do things to help them educationally, socially, emotionally, lots of different ways and lots of different supports. That's what this money's for, and that's how we want to spend it. So learning acceleration is a pretty big category. It can include things like supplemental instruction during the summer, during the regular school year. It can include social emotional support, more technology, more software, more hardware, more creative uses of technology to supplement what we're doing in person. We can increase our current alternative education programs as needed. We probably will have to beef up UISA some for next year, our Independent Study Academy. The signal we're getting from school services and from the governor is that distance learning will not be an option next year. But that means that some families who are still reticent to come back will maybe want to go to independent study. So we may need to look at bulking up that program a little bit. Again, additional staff. A couple of these different grants call for us to hire more paraprofessionals explicitly. We have to spend a certain amount of this money on paraprofessionals. We have to spend parts of this money on additional staffing for classroom support. And then miscellaneous items like PPE. I don't know what we're going to need in the way of PPE this time next year, but there's a chance we're going to need something. You see that the bubble on the top left is general fund relief. As we foreshadowed a few minutes ago, what can we do to help our general fund so that when this one-time money is gone and when the state economy takes a downturn, we're ready? We want to talk about that quite a bit. The big bubble on the top right is facilities. ESSER 3, our biggest pot of money at $12.5 million, says we can use it for HVAC systems. Well, we know we have a lot of HVAC work to do in our district. What a great opportunity for us to leverage our bond dollars and do more. And then in the bottom right, we have future needs. So we want to make sure, as we said, we don't want to commit everything. We also might be able to keep some of this money towards the end and do a tech refresh out of it before the money expires. So there's lots of different things we want to be thinking of, both short-term and long-term, as we talk about how we're going to budget this money. I couldn't find a good puzzle graphic to put in here, but hopefully you get the idea that learning acceleration really is a combination of funding. It's going to be the COVID-19 funds that we're talking about. It's also the general fund. It's also supplemental and concentration grant funds. And it's also other categoricals. All these things are going to work together to help us with this learning acceleration that is so critical for our kids. It won't be any one of these pots of money. It will be all of them working together. So again, learning acceleration is our primary focus. We definitely want to make sure we're running an enhanced summer school program through the summer of '24 at least. Not sure how enhanced it will be this summer. We know that kids are tired and staff is tired, and we wanted to run a really robust program. The numbers may not be quite as robust, but maybe for the summer of '22, the summer of '23, and the summer of '24, we can have much more robust programs and really help kids catch up and help build them up. Before and after school tutorials and other school day tutorial supports. We have to spend more money on paras. We have to spend more money on lots of different things to help kids during the day, not just during the summer. Social emotional support. Do we look at hiring a couple more counselors with this money? Do we look at finding some other programs to help support our kids? Anything we can do for supplemental small group instruction. Again, really just trying to help us connect with the kids and help us help the kids educationally. And again, as I said a couple times now, paraprofessionals, it's interesting how specific some of this language is about paraprofessionals.
Why do you think that is, Steve? I'm kind of curious about that.
I am too. I think it's a good way to get the small group instruction. I think that's really kind of the focus. I think it's something we would have done on our own. I don't think we needed this language to encourage us to do this, but it's clear we have to do this. So yeah, I think that's at the heart of it. You know, Katie and Deb might have better answers than that, but.
I don't know if I have a better answer. I think I think people lobbied to have local control and decision-making over how this funding is used, especially in small rural areas. It's really hard to hire qualified paraprofessionals. This can also be used for training. So that's one thing that came up in our strategic plan. So I don't know why it ended up this specific in this way, because many people in the state advocated for really local control and not having anything super specific like that. But I don't know the politics that go on.
The paraprofessional lobbyist did a good job, I guess. I don't know. Yeah, interesting. Okay, facilities, kind of the second pillar under our framework. Again, it's the newest variable as part of ESSER 3. This might allow us to get more HVAC projects done, might help us get them done sooner. For instance, if we can use these funds to pay for projects we're doing at Ukiah and Eagle Peak, that means we can start Nokomis and Oak Manor sooner. And it also means maybe we can pay for those out of these same funds so we can start the next project sooner and just make our bond dollars go further. So it's a really
Steve-
exciting opportunity. But
Yeah, can I just, sorry, just to clarify there, I thought Pomalita was on the HVAC list as well.
it is as well. You're right.
And is that was bond money, the intention was there? For,
Yes. Yep.
okay.
So that's another one we could try to knock off sooner. Absolutely. Yep. I want to be careful. We're not quite sure. There are some pre-qualification hurdles we have to go through to be able to spend these monies on facilities, and we don't quite understand those yet. So some of these projects are already underway. We're not sure if we can get those in under this money. We think we can, but until we can actually do it, I don't want to sit here and commit 100%. But we will figure out what we have to do to get as many projects funded as we want to out of this money going forward. And the one last piece is, and this is going to be really tight. We can't promise this, but if we act quickly, there's a remote chance we could get some outdoor areas set up before the fall, some shade structures even possibly. It's going to be tight and it's going to be a scramble. But if we get clear direction tonight that we can go forward with that, there's a chance we can get some in place. And we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. So general fund reserves. There are several ways to build up our reserves, again, for the inevitable economic downturn. We could increase the reserve above 9%. I'm not sure we really have to do that. I think there's other ways we can build up some reserves. And the other thing that's kind of interesting is our 9% reserve now is worth a lot more than a 9% reserve was 15 months ago. Because remember, it's based on a percentage of your expenditures each year. Well, we're spending all of this one-time money now. So for every $1 million in this $33 million we spend, our reserve goes up $90,000. So our reserve is more now than it was. Our 9% reserve is still 9%, but it's worth more than it was a year and a half ago. So does that make sense? It's kind of a weird concept to try to explain, but so our reserve is more, even though it's the same percentage.
So Steve, what other ways would we do it?
I'm glad you asked. Thank you. And we'll talk more about that in a couple slides, but really it's going to be utilizing these COVID funds to pay for things that we typically fund out of the general fund. There are no supplanting issues, if you want to get into the weeds a little bit, with these funds. Typically with federal funds, you can't use them to pay for something you would normally pay for out of the unrestricted general fund. All of these pandemic related funds don't have that restriction. So we could buy all of our Chromebooks and buy all of our staff technology out of these funds, the pandemic funds, but put aside the money that we would have spent out of the general fund, put it into a reserve. So 5 years from now, when we have to buy Chromebooks again, the money's already there.
All right, very tricky.
Yep, it is. So we'll give you a lot of examples of that here in a couple minutes, but thank you for the question. It was a good segue. And then again, the last piece is just the future needs. It's just so hard to know. Think how much the world has changed in 15 months. Like I said at the beginning, where are we going to be 15 months from now? Who knows? So we'd recommend probably setting aside $2.5 million, which is roughly 20% of the ESSER 3 funds for a little while until we have a clearer picture of additional funding that might be coming or what our future needs might really be. Are we married to this number? No, but I think it might be a pretty good place to be looking at because it's really 10% of our new funds. Okay, so with that, if there's any other questions, I'm going to jump into what we're calling the early easy recommendations. Okay, so we recommend maintaining our 9% reserve as we talked about a minute ago. But we've already had several reserves set up in our general fund. We've been putting money aside for deferred maintenance every year, and we put some money aside for facilities. We don't have those contributions budgeted for this year. So we'd like to go ahead and make those contributions for 2020-21, $300,000 to deferred maintenance and $100,000 to facilities. And we'd like to budget that each year going forward. We think that's a good way to be putting money aside for our facilities. We know the bond funds alone won't be enough.
Steve, can I just stop you there for a second? So you said we had it budgeted, but we didn't do it? I'm a little confused there. Had we not? What do you mean by that?
Right. So it's like in 1920, we did contribute to both of those pots of money. We did not make the contributions in 2021. Because
we were worried about money, crazily enough?
Right. If you think back to June of 2020, when the state was taking money away from us and our budget was upside down, we were actually pulling these reserves back into the general fund to stay solvent. But we didn't end up having to do that So we went ahead, we unbudgeted the transfers, taking those monies away, but we did not budget to put more money into them because we weren't sure how our general fund was going to go through the year.
Oh, okay.
But now that we think we're going to finish the year fairly well, we'd like to go ahead and make those contributions for this year and get them back on in the multi-year budget for the future years.
Okay.
Textbooks is the next one. We have been putting $442,500. I don't quite know how that specific of an amount developed, but we have been putting that money into a textbook reserve each year for the last several years. We did that as most recently as last year, 1920. We weren't planning to do that anymore because that money now comes out of SCG. But as we sat down and looked at what we have in reserves, we have like 2.7 million in this textbook reserve and about $1 million in our lottery instructional materials reserve. So if we contribute another 325,000 this year, that gets us to $4 million in reserves for textbooks. Now, in talking with Katie, we know we have several big adoptions coming up in the next 2, 3, 4 years. A couple of them are $1.3, $1.4 million each. So we think setting aside a little bit more money now would really help us. Excuse me. Starting next year, starting in 21-22, I'd like to set up a technology reserve, as we talked about a minute ago. Let's start putting in, if we're trying to refresh our Chromebooks once every 5 years, we've blown that cycle because we bought all new Chromebooks in this last year. Let's start putting it aside 1/5 of the cost of replacing all the Chromebooks again. So 5 years from now, when we have to buy more Chromebooks, the money's there. Let's put aside $100,000 a year for staff technology. Again, we've refreshed a lot of the staff technology, and we'll probably refresh some more over the summer. Excuse me. So again, just having that money there, so 4 or 5 years from now, especially if the economy has taken a downturn, we don't have to scramble and stress over how to buy new Chromebooks and buy new staff technology because the money's already been put aside. Beginning in 2020-21, we would like to increase the contribution we make to the Safety, Equipment, and Vehicle Replacement Fund from $100,000 a year to $200,000 a year. Now that was one of the reserves that we zeroed out at the beginning of this year, but we did bring back and increase to 100,000 back in the fall once we knew we had money again for this year. We'd like to go ahead and double it just because we know there's a lot of things we may need down the road. I'd also like to be creative in how we use this. A lot of the things we buy out of this pot of money, we can also buy out of the COVID funds. But there are some things we really need that we can't buy from COVID funds. Like we need 3 vehicles for the maintenance, operations, and grounds folks. We need some field maintenance equipment. So if we can free up this money and then use it for those things that can't be purchased from COVID funds, it helps us improve our infrastructure while really not hurting the general fund too much.
Steve, what would be a safety expenditure? It has safety equipment and vehicle replacement.
It's anything from Band-Aids at times or first aid kits for the sites to cameras, security cameras for the sites, to radios, to things like that.
So it includes sort of security things.
Security and like AED batteries and all those sorts of different things.
Okay.
As part of the supplemental concentration grant, that used to also contribute $100,000 a year towards safety, quote unquote. And they are suggesting suspending that until 24-25 so they can use those funds to provide additional in-person supports for students. And the next trick really does, not trick, but the next item doesn't impact the unrestricted general fund, but we'd like to start putting money away for the synthetic field at the high school now, like we do to replace and refinish the track at the high school. We've already been putting money aside for that each year. We believe the field will last about 10 years, assuming we go forward with that project later this fall. And it'll be about $1 million to replace that field in 10 years, 12 years. Well, if we start putting $80,000 aside now, again, when it's time to replace that field in 12 years, the money will be there. So we'd like to start setting that money aside as well. So that's kind of all the general fund reserve pieces. Any questions or comments on that before we go to the next slide?
No questions from the board? I can't see you all, so if you are raising your hand, just unmute and start talking. But now I'm seeing nobody is. Okay, carry on, Steve.
Great, thank you. Okay, our next item is increasing bus driver positions to 8 hours per day for the next 3 years. This would, A, would have to be negotiated, and B, it would be optional for our current employees. But we hear one of the impediments to hiring drivers is that they're not 8-hour positions. We have to have more bus drivers. We've already seen this spring how, because we can put so few kids on our buses, we can't transport everybody who wants to be transported. And it is hard to find bus drivers anymore. I mean, we talk to districts around us. There is a huge transportation organization in Santa Rosa, called West County Transportation, JPA. They do Santa Rosa City Schools transportation. They were something like 18 drivers short, right? So it's not a Ukiah thing. It's a problem everywhere. But if we can increase our hours, increase our bus driving staff, that would be a great thing. So we'd like to move forward with that.
Steve,
Yes.
if it's
I
an
see
8-hour
you.
position, how do we, it's not 8 hours of driving. So I'm just wondering what the thought process is for utilizing the rest of those hours that aren't driving hours.
Sure. Well, there could be several different ways. It could be something you're working with grounds or custodial, or working as a paraprofessional, possibly provide some extra support to students on site. You know, our drivers have great relationships with our kids, and so there might be something to do there. Also, you know, hopefully there will be a lot of field trips and a lot of sports trips starting again next year. And so the drivers could be driving those trips, and then part of that trip, they'll already be paid. So the cost of our field trips and the cost of our sports trips will already be covered in part, because it'll be part of the driver's base salaries. So it's a way to maybe, again, take a little pressure off the general fund, plus get some extra support for the district.
And when you and the team were discussing that particular option, my memory is that we had already attempted to, well, it wasn't an 8-hour position. It could have been 4 and 4. We've pushed that concept in the past, I thought, and I'm not sure how many drivers actually chose to take that option. And so I'm wondering why it might be more palatable now.
It looks like Superintendent Cuban has a response, and Trustee Mogard, I know you had a comment as well, but I'll start with Cuban to respond to that.
Tyler, that was in regard to paraprofessionals. We were trying to combine positions so that it was a full-time position instead of a part-time position. We have not tried this with bus drivers yet, and I want to tell everybody this is negotiable. So anyway, but that you're thinking of in the past when we've tried to create paraprofessionals, our special ed paraprofessional positions, from part-time to more full-time positions.
Trustee Mogard?
I just have the same question. I know we've brought this up about bus drivers before too, but it just wasn't one of those that moved forward, I guess. So I am very much in favor of giving full-time jobs with full-time salaries so that it's a win-win. We have more control over our staffing, and the employee has more support in working here.
Correct. And Katie just reminded me of another idea too. We've talked about trying to be able to keep kids on campus for tutorials after school. One of the impediments to that is kids need the bus ride home. Well, if we can take the kids home that aren't staying, then come back and take the kids home who are staying by running a second afternoon route, that helps us too. So there's lots of different ways we probably haven't even thought of yet to really help the kids be on campus more, get more support, and get them to school and home after school.
To that end, Steve, do we need more buses?
No, buses is the one thing we don't need. We have plenty of buses, and we're about to get some more from one of the grants, the electric grants that you approved recently. So buses are not the issue. Bus drivers.
It's the drivers. Okay.
We have 3 vacancies right now that we've had all year. Plus that we might need to create a couple more positions if we can find the drivers. I think it would be good.
We got enough buses. Okay, good.
Plenty of buses. Okay, I'll turn share back on here. Okay, our facilities needs, as we've already talked about, and pursue the outdoor educational areas. Again, it's going to be tight, but we'd like to try. We've had an architect working on it to see what's even doable. We've been talking to vendors to see if we could even procure the materials. And a quick aside, we're already seeing that materials are getting much more expensive and much more hard to get. So it's going to be interesting. Think of every district in the country getting all of this money for facilities and what they're going to be buying and who we're competing with. So the more we can do more quickly, the better off we're going to be.
Capitalism at its best.
Yes, it is. Again, we've talked about the HVAC projects, and there are a few other things we would like to do. Some of the sites would like a few more tables, and we'd like to get some umbrellas for all those tables to give the kids some shade while they're sitting outside, hoping they don't blow away. So we'll make sure we anchor them down really well. Moving on, we'd like to extend our partnerships with the city of Ukiah, with Space, and with the Boys and Girls Club through our summer school program. Again, our hope is to make summer really special for our kids, through our summer school program and through these partnerships. Get as many kids as we can engaged, get them involved, and just get them back. We don't mean for it to be a rigorous academic summer. We mean for it to be a fun, engaging summer. And these partners have been tremendous with us for the last several months, and we'd like to keep those going. And again, we just know there's going to be some other, the $5,000 and $10,000 texts and emails, things we need for graduation, for start of school in the fall, things we learned from having kids back for 6 or 8 weeks in the spring. Oh yeah, I wish we'd had this, or I wish we'd thought of that. There will be some other ideas of things we want to do at some of the sites. And we want to be able to be creative. We want to be able to try some different things. Again, it's all about really just making the kids excited and getting them re-engaged. So with that, that's kind of what I had at this point. I don't know, Katie, if you want to jump in and talk about your work, or if we want to finish this first.
Steve, can you talk about this last slide, what our recommendations are to the board?
Sure. So we recommend that I'd like you to approve this framework that we've been talking about, again, with the 4 primary focuses being learning acceleration, facilities, the general fund reserves, and the future needs. We'd like you to approve the early, easy recommendations tonight so we can get going on those. Again, time is of the essence on some of those things. And then we would just like to make this part of our normal budget cycle going forward, where you'll keep seeing it with interims and with budgets, and as things change. If we decide there's an expensive new expenditure we want to make, or if new money becomes available, or if the rules change, we would of course come back to you right away and talk with you about that and see how we best move forward. So that's kind of the recommendations in a nutshell.
Steve, can I ask for some kind of technical questions? Do you take all this money and incorporate it into our regular budget, or will we always be looking at these separately?
Yes.
Yes.
You do
what?
always see it's all in our general fund. So when we come to you with our first interim or second interim or the budget, it's in the general fund.
Mm-hmm.
What I really want to make sure we do going forward is I want to really give you almost 2 budgets, one with all these funds included and one without these funds, and kind of show you what the reserve would be without, if this wasn't happening, and where the reserve is with it happening, and help you see really how much impact this has on our general fund budget, because it is pretty staggering. And it's hard for me to even wrap my mind around it. So I don't remember if it was school services or one of the other groups that we work with had that idea of presenting 2 budgets, one with and one without. And I thought it was really a good idea, because at some point we won't have these monies again, and we want to make sure that we're in good shape when that time comes as well. But yeah,
I think that's okay. I agree. I think that's really important because it is such a large amount of money, and it's still one time. So it's so important to think about it differently, but still recognize that it's enough money to do pretty, remarkable things with as well.
Yes, but it really distorts an $80 million budget. It does, and so we want to make sure we understand our budget both ways, so we don't get surprised at the end.
Superintendent Cupid?
I also wanted to just add one of these funds, the Extended Learning Opportunities Grant, it requires a plan be submitted to the state by June 1st. And so Steve talked about that funding, but we have to submit a more specific plan. And we have to have the level of stakeholder engagement that we're supposed to have with our LCAP. And so we have rolled that process into our LCAP stakeholder engagement process. And so what we'd like to do is bring the plan to you by May 1st, or our May meeting. And so Katie, we wanted to share with you specifically what the technical writing team came up with for these funds. And so that in May, when we bring you a plan, you sort of have a heads up, you have a little bit of time to give input. So that's it. That's one of these pots of money that Steve is talking about, but it just is, and that's the fund that requires that a certain percentage be spent on paraprofessionals. So you'll see in that plan that we've identified expenditures related to paraprofessionals, and Katie can talk about that for you.
Before we jump into that, I just want to give the board an opportunity to see if there's any clarifying questions about Steve's presentation, if that's okay, Deb.
Absolutely. I did.
Okay.
Yep.
So maybe, Steve, if you can bring back your last slide, and I'm not going to ask the board to vote on this yet, but I just want to make sure we're all clarified on this last slide and then go into the in-depth on one of those funds that you're talking about, Deb. So are there any questions from the board on these kind of four priority areas in the budget framework? So, okay. I felt like just future needs is a little unclear to me. So I'm wondering if you could clarify, Steve, what you meant exactly by future needs.
That was just the 2.5 million we advocated
okay.
setting aside out of ESSER 3, just because 18 months from now, there may be something else we haven't thought of yet.
So it's sort of undefined future needs, but that sounds a little
Right.
cagey. So you want, okay, I got it. All right.
Yeah, and definitely as we come back to you each time we talk about these budgets, we'll talk about that and say, is this still the right amount? Do we feel good about this? Do we want to use some of it for here's a new future need? Or yeah, it's
okay,
just part of that process.
Sort of ideas we haven't had yet.
Right.
Okay, Trustee Nelson.
Steve, I understand that our 9% is going up for now, but when we stop spending that money in a couple of years, that 9% will go back to where it more or less where it is currently. Is that correct?
Correct. It'll take a few years, but it will get there.
Okay, and so I'm wondering for the long term, and it sounds to me like you're suggesting let's stick with the 9% as opposed to increasing it to where the norm is around California.
Yeah, and certainly unified districts throughout the state, the 1920 averages just came out, and they're around 17% reserves. I think we were like 12 and a half when we finished last year. So we're comparable with the other districts. We're a little bit low, but even those districts don't have board policy that sets the reserves that high. One of the things that will happen, especially if the state economy keeps going the way it is there is language that could trigger how much reserves districts can have, and at some point we may not be able to have this much reserve. So whereas if it's put aside in the Chromebook reserve and things like that, those monies are safe. Those monies can't be impacted by that legislation.
Superintendent Cuban?
And Steve, wouldn't you say that 17% average, it includes their reserve plus their unspent ending fund balance, right?
Correct.
Which a lot of districts would have been higher last year.
So one of the benefits by using these other reserve pots is it gives us some more flexibility. But on the flip side, and this is a question, not a statement. On the flip side, if when things go south, I guess we still have those other reserves that we could ultimately say, well, we need money, we got to pull it out of the Chromebook pot, or we need money, we'll pull it out of I can't remember what the other reserve funds are that you're proposing.
Right, and if you remember, that's what we did last June. We took back all the textbook money, we took back all the deferred maintenance money, we took back, there was another one as well. There was some facilities money we took back because we needed it to make sure we had our 9% at the end of 3 years out. And we had said that if this is how the budget played out, that would be our first priority to restore when we had money again. But happily, the state budget didn't play out that way, and we were able to not bring those monies back into the unrestricted general fund.
I think it would be helpful for me, or I think it would be helpful if we had a concept of what the various reserve pots we have, what those look like, so we can actually say, okay, we are close to 17%. We are close to what some other stable districts are. And I guess and then the other thing I'm thinking about is the textbooks. That is one that would be, at least in my mind, less touchable. Anyways, it would be great to see what the total is as far as percentage goes, so we can kind of have a concept of what that number really looks like.
Yeah, I like that. We could certainly present that as we talk about reserves in each of our budget presentations. We can certainly do that.
Thank you.
To me, I really appreciate the idea of having, essentially they're kind of replacement reserves. They're expenditures we're making now that we know we need to replace in 10 years, like the turf replacement or something like that. Because when the time comes, and having joined the board at a moment when there wasn't a lot of money, or it was sort of a weird moment, we were at like the bottom and just about to recover, but having to have those pitched conversations between investing in our staff, which is our core need, and then but we also have all these broken Chromebooks, is really an uncomfortable conversation, and it's really hard to have. And so if we're prepared for that ahead of time, when we have restricted money, we can really focus it on people, because we know we're going to be able to take care of the items that we could save for. Okay, so and then any questions about the early easy recommendations? I mean, I'm going to wait till Katie's presentation before we vote on these, but I did want to see if there's any questions on those.
I have a question.
Okay, go ahead, Susan.
Steve, I'm wondering if the $200,000 is enough that you've set aside for the, I don't exactly remember what you called it, but for the buses and stuff like that, the vehicles and stuff. Do we know how long the batteries are going to last? Because from my understanding that each battery that we use on an electric bus cost $100,000. So it looked like you wanted to set aside $200,000. We've purchased one electric bus, I want to say 3 years ago. So that's 2 years. And that, from my understanding, that battery is going to need to be replaced. Do we want to raise those funds?
Yeah, that's a great question. And part of one of our operating assumptions based on information we've received is that there will be grants available to replace these batteries as they expire. But if those grants don't materialize, or if we don't get enough, that will become a general fund expense. So that is a great point. Is increasing this to 200,000 and then maybe not spending all of it the next 2 or 3 years, does that give us some insulation for those sorts of things? It does. Do we want to increase that a little more? I mean, that's certainly a conversation we can talk about. I'd like to research a little more on the battery replacement and come back with a stronger recommendation, but that's a great point. Because yeah, that's one of those things we can't quite foresee just yet.
Okay, thank you.
No, thank you.
Other questions on the early easy recommendations?
Can you put them back up again?
Yeah.
Well, I can try if my computer will
We just go
cooperate.
backwards, yeah.
There you go.
So the first one was all these different reserves. And then the next slide, maybe, Steve, and I agree. I think we, obviously we don't need it right now, but in the future, some sort of chart that kind of shows out those specific reserves would be helpful. And then these are the next remaining 4 early easy recommendations. Did you have a question or a comment, Trustee Mulgard?
No, it was going to be about performance metrics and things like that. But, it's been such a tough year that nobody can really even think about that. So I'm just going to be quiet.
I did have a question on number 5. I needed a little more clarity on what that meant. The site and district-wide operational needs. I was a little confused what that means.
Well, for instance, we had done site allocations out of the initial monies.
Okay.
Most of the sites have fully expended those funds at this point. And so it's back to the $5,000 and $10,000 conversations is, hey, I want to go off and get some more signs to remind kids to wash their hands, or I want to get some more stickers to put on the floor to remind kids to stay 3 feet apart, or we need a little more plexiglass here. Those kind of expenditures. Just if a department or if a site needs a little bit more money to do those sorts of things, maybe we do another round of site allocations for sites that have already spent all of their money.
So it'd be somewhat flexible funds to the sites, but for operational things, again, not salaries or people, but like stuff. Correct. Kind of stuff, yeah, mostly.
Definitely stuff and initiatives, and if it's a pilot program or if it's another set of novels or something, because I don't want kids passing back, all sorts of things like that. They don't want them passing the books back and forth.
Okay, so site specific one-time expenses that would improve operations.
Right.
Okay.
It's a much better way of saying that. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions about these?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Number 2, the bus driver position. I realize this has to be negotiated and so on. But I just wonder if I'm sure you have given some consideration to the idea that after the COVID funds are spent, then we have these 8-hour positions we're going to have to somehow figure out how to continue. Correct?
Yes.
Yes.
So at that point, if we've proven that's the best way to attract and retain drivers, then that'll be a priority for us as a district, and it'll become a general fund expense, that extra 2.5 hours that isn't funded right now out of the general fund for a lot of our drivers, or hour and a half, whatever it is, depending on the route that they've been bidding on and things. So yeah, that might be something else we want to start putting money aside for in the general fund in a year or two. If we see that this is really successful and really makes a difference, we want to be ready to make sure it can come back into the general fund when the time comes.
And how many bus driver positions are there?
Oh, you would ask me that. I want to say 16.
16. I think it's 16.
And how many of them are 8-hour positions right now?
2.
Okay. So it'd make quite a difference to a number of them.
Correct.
It's more than 2, but it would make a difference to a lot of people.
To me, I see this as one of those opportunities to try out something. I mean, we've always suspected if we had, more full-time positions, we would be able to attract bus drivers. This will be an opportunity to see if that's really true. And I think, Steve, you're right. And if in 2 years we're still struggling with bus drivers, we'll have to come back to the drawing board and say there must be something else, that we could do. So it'll be an interesting experiment.
Yes, it will be, because as you all know, we've tried all sorts of things. Hiring bonuses, paying for training. We've got billboards everywhere. When the movie theaters were open, we had ads in the movie theaters. We've got them on buses. So anyway, we have tried a lot. So I'm looking forward to seeing if this might do it.
Now, do all the bus drivers want to be 8 hours or just some?
It's a good question.
We don't know that yet, B, because we haven't negotiated this, and we may have some who do not want to be 8 hours, and we certainly will accommodate that.
Okay. All right.
Is that what you were thinking, Nicole? It would be like up to 8.
Yeah, there are so many details on this that would be negotiated, and in addition to that, this is a classified position, so we would also need to be working with the Personnel Commission on this. But I think that I feel confident that we could get something negotiated and work out the details with the Personnel Commission to get something in place that could be workable.
So it sounds like, because that's, again, maybe another reason it's an early recommendation, is there's some work to be done to be able to make this kind of an offer on the table for the fall. It's not going to happen overnight. There's some steps involved. Okay.
Correct. We can't just wave our magic wand. Yeah.
Really? Seems like we've been doing a lot of waving of magic wands recently, but okay. Any other questions from the board on these early, easy recommendations? Okay, so go ahead.
Going back to the B-clad question for a moment. Why couldn't the B-clad also be an early, easy recommendation? It also has to be negotiated, but so does the bus driver position.
I think it could. I mean, we could add that to an early, easy recommendation.
Is that the will of the board? Does anybody not think that's a good idea?
I'm trying to look at everybody. To me, that seems very easy. Again, our sticking point in the past has been negotiations. So this will continue to be a negotiated item, but we certainly have the money to experiment with this as well for the next 3 years.
But it does have to be negotiated though, right?
Correct. Yes.
That's the big deal.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But we would be giving the direction to the board tonight, which is maybe we're not doing this in the right format.
Right. This is a little tricky, and we
Okay.
should be cautious with negotiable items, but it would be a negotiable item, but we have put things on budget items that we know are pending negotiations. So we just don't want to get too into the detail of it.
Okay. So we won't negotiate it right now in public, but we could add it as a number 6 item to consider. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Thank you, Megan.
One of our wishes.
So is the board okay with adding that as number 6? Okay, I'm seeing a lot of nods. Okay. Okay, good. Any other questions or comments about this? Okay, so let's pause. I'm not going to have us vote on this yet in case other questions come up, but maybe Deb, we go back to Katie's explanation of the work she's done on preparing for one of those funds that seems to require a lot of planning. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay.
And this is more of a heads up for the board to let you know where we are with things. We're meeting with leadership about it tomorrow, so they haven't had time to discuss this list in whole. This list was generated by our strategic plan writing, technical writing team, which has teachers, our classified and administrators on. And they sort of, they roll through all of the feedback that's given, look at our goals and make sure that these items are in line with those goals, as well as what is needed going forward with learning acceleration. So that's how this list was generated. It hasn't been processed through everybody yet. So we're just really giving the board a heads up and looking for any early input. And then we bring a plan back to the board in May.
And real quick, I put back up on the screen, it's the second blue row that has the resource 7425 and 7426. That's the expanded learning opportunity grant we're talking about. And you see that 10% has to go to paraprofessionals, and then 85% of this total must be spent on in-person services. So just to frame the dollars for you, so it's like $4.5 million, 85% must be spent on in-person.
So I'm going to share my screen. And as Deb said, we've been working with our writing team, taking in all the input. And we have a very draft plan here that we want to share. It was also on our last board meeting. It's been revised slightly with some better numbers and some better verbiage. And as Steve was sharing the PowerPoint, you know, we're looking at both our shorter term recovery and our longer term recovery. So most of these items in here are looking at the short term. And this document really is looking at, we took all the input and then we looked at things that, you know, had a lot of feedback and also things that we felt were in line with our goals. And some of the funding sources, we have not identified what funding sources, as Steve shared, there's lots of different funding sources. But one of the ones that we do have to have the plan for is the expanded learning grant. And the expanded learning grant is to support supplemental instruction, support for social emotional growth, and meals and snacks if needed. We already cover that, so we're not planning on using any of those funds. So we haven't identified where all these actions will be funded out of, but many of them will be out of the Expanded Learning Opportunities Grant. So some of the highlights that are in here is offering our expanded summer programs. We typically offer summer programs for 4 weeks. So this summer we're offering a 6-week program, and we think that's important ongoing. And you can see that. Also providing incentives and possibly childcare support for staff in the summer. Because children aren't in school. And you can see those. And
just to clarify, that would be for employees who are teaching summer school.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, Steve said, can I make it bigger? I had to, I was having some tech issues as well. And just give me 1 minute. And
President Van Sant, before Katie runs through each item, I know the board received this last night. I don't know if you want her to run through every item or if you want to, how you want to handle it.
You're right. I was sort of spacing out there for a second. Let's ask the board. Do you want, so there, this is like a 4-page document, but there are a lot of line items on it. Do you want Katie to go through each one, or do you want to take a quick moment? You guys can look through it and see if there's questions. I'm looking at the board for direction here. You're all not really giving it to me.
I've had the opportunity to go through it. We don't need to go through it line by line.
Okay, so I'm going to give us 1 minute to like look through it on your screen or paper. I'll give you like 2 minutes so we can just quietly sit here for a minute. Okay.
Good.
Okay, is there questions from the board on any of the items?
Yes.
Trustee Barrett?
Yeah, I have a few questions. I guess the first one that was my biggest question, additional staff to support distance learning, $400,000.
Yep, I noticed that one too.
I don't know, what is that about? Not
Um,
gonna support distance learning.
We have not removed that since our last board meeting, but it may be that we have to staff up UISA because we have more families who choose independent study programs. So we haven't removed it yet. We haven't spoken with the administrators yet, Carolyn, about the board's discussion last Thursday. So we just left it in there for now.
Okay. So if we do have to beef up the UISA program, we think it will require that much money, or, I mean, that seems a lot.
That's approximately 50 students, about 50 students.
Okay. All right. I have a couple other questions. Should I say them now?
I think you should, yeah, just go through them now.
Okay. Also the evening tutoring by teachers, that one I thought, I can't imagine going home after teaching all day and tutoring for a couple hours at night. That, I mean, did you have teachers suggest that, or where did that idea come from?
We did have teachers suggest it.
You did?
Yes.
Okay.
People have liked having that evening access for tutoring, and some of them can't tutor right after school. And so anyway, they did suggest it.
Okay. And then I was wondering if 2,000 is enough to budget for the extended summer school program.
You mean 2 million?
You mean 2 million?
Million.
Is it 2 million that was in there? I thought it was
Yes.
2.
Yeah, 2 million
yeah.
makes a lot more sense than 2.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not enough money.
No.
But 2 million sounds like a lot, so.
Yeah, it does. 2 million does sound like a lot. Okay. Well, thanks for clarifying that. And let's see. I also had a question about on the strategic plan budget list. There was a pilot grade 4 through 6 content area specialization. I didn't understand that.
So let me just quickly, Carolyn, you've moved to a different document, which is totally fine, right? But it's the other, we're talking about the, right, that's okay. No, I think we should answer the question now. I just wanted to, in case the board members were wondering. So that's on the strategic plan budget. And go ahead,
Right.
okay, do you want to answer that question?
Sure. So when our 1-year goal was looking at mathematics, and a lot of discussion came up when we look at our data at grades 4 and 5, we see a decline in our math scores and math achievement. And so we did some research with Hanover Research, and also looking at having teachers share and become more content specialists, meaning you and I teach 5th grade, and I'm going to do science and math, and you're going to teach English language arts and social studies, and we're going to team teach that together so that we can become better content specialists. But it's not hiring content specialists, it's working on piloting that. And we did have Oak Manor do that this year. Even in distance learning, they did some piloting where they had one teacher focus on teaching the math this year. And they felt like so far that was a really good result. And they saw some good results from that. So we'll still be piloting that next year, because we were hoping to do a bigger pilot this year, but that's what we mean by that.
Okay, well, that clarifies things. We've done that for a long time.
Yeah. We just don't have anyone doing it now, and we think it would be, we when we look at our data, we think could be a good solution.
I really like that idea. I think it's really worth.
Yeah, I've found as a principal that it worked really well.
Yeah, and we do have it at Grace Hudson.
Okay.
Okay.
And I just would like to say that I strongly support hiring retired teachers to work, part days or whatever. I think that has been so successful at Frank Zeke and at Calpella and some other places that have done that. I think it's really worked well. And hiring the extra paraprofessionals, if we do the proper training with them, I think extra people in the classroom to do more small group instruction is invaluable. So we give that input.
Great. Thank you.
I agree with that. And just because Trustee Barrett brought it up, what does it mean by pending health guidance? Is that, because you have here short-term hiring of retired teachers to support small group reading intervention, meaning like this would have to be allowed, assuming this
Correct.
is allowed. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
And we assume it will be. I mean,
Okay.
all indication from the state is that we're going to be business as usual in the fall with maybe wearing some masks.
Okay.
But we'll see how it goes.
Thank you. Trustee Asbury?
If I'm reading this correctly, it says fund STEM education, $16,000 for transportation. Now, if we raise the transportation, and then this is just out of the whim, if we raise it to the 8 hours, will we still need that in this plan?
That's for the express bus that's supposed to go from town to Eagle Peak. So we'll probably need to increase that amount.
Okay. And then it says the RVOEP is on here too, and I was just kind of trying to figure out that as well.
Yeah, and Susan, the RVOEP doesn't include any transportation cost in that line item.
Okay, that's just what it costs for the school to go to the RVOEP.
The,
Okay.
the staff.
That is for the staff.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Other questions from the board? Okay, so if I understand, we're not approving this tonight.
No.
Is that correct? You're looking for input, which we gave, and we will approve it in May.
Yes, that is
okay.
Part, yes.
And at that point in time, so I just want to recap this mostly for myself, but maybe for the benefit of the board as well. What we will be doing in May is approving the strategic plan / LCAP like we always do, but incorporated into that is the plan for the specific pot of money that's requiring a plan. Is that correct?
So it's a little complicated.
Okay.
So in May, you're going to be approving the Extended Learning Opportunities Grant Plan.
As its own thing.
Yep.
Okay.
It is not, unfortunately, right.
Okay.
It will be some of that.
Some of that, right.
But it's a state template that we
Okay.
are required to use. Unfortunately, they did not integrate it into the LCAP because we'd love to
Okay.
bring you one plan. What we're doing in May with the LCAP strategic plan is it's the board, it's not your final opportunity to give input, but you're giving us really clear direction on, yes, we like this, or change this or that. And then that comes back to you in June for final approval, the LCAP does.
Okay, so in May, we're getting the plan for this specific grant. We're also getting the draft LCAP of which that specific grant is incorporated into it.
No.
Two separate things.
Two
Okay.
separate things, and there'll be two separate agenda items.
Okay, got it. So
Sorry.
it will, okay, I think I got it. All right.
Yes.
Other questions from the board? So I appreciate this, Katie. I feel like there's like some really good solid direction in here and plans for how things are going to go. I do share Trustee Barrett's like, really, someone wants to do nighttime tutoring, but I guess if the teachers want to do it and there's demand from the kids, why not? But we'll see, worth putting in there. I also just appreciate the college going and career education focus as well. I think that's really great because I did notice during this last year, some of that kind of information that you would normally get going to school every day, was harder for kids to absorb in some of those key grades where they really need to start thinking about their plans for high school or college or career. So.
And President Van Sant, that's probably going to go into our LCAP supplemental concentration grant funding. It's more appropriate to fund out of there. We'd like to see that in the long term. And because summer school is going to be funded out of these funds, we'll be able to take care of that.
Okay.
Definitely.
And like Trustee Barrett, I love the idea of using as many skilled retired teachers as you can. I think that we've had some really good outcomes with making it competitive for them to consider subbing when we actually made that, a better paying position. So this is a great way if we can get them to come back, and they probably will, just for a few hours a day. So that's awesome. Any other questions from the board? Okay, so I'm going to bring us back to, unless actually Superintendent Cuban what do you want to do next?
Nope, I think going back is perfect.
Okay, so let's go back to the bottom line slide. Actually, I don't know if let's do that really fast if you don't mind, Steve. And I'm going to do this in a slightly different order. I'm going to ask the board for a motion to approve the early easy recommendations so that that administration can move forward with those concepts now. And
I would like to make that motion, but I'm wondering if the board be agreeable to taking space funding out of the motion, just because I am on the space board. I need to abstain from that vote. So could I make the motion to approve the easy early recommendations with the exception of the space funding and have you do that separate?
Yeah, I'm just thinking for clarity, Trustee Fernandez, it might be best just to remove number 4, just so it's really clear that we'll be approving all the early easy. Let me back up. The early easy recommendation list includes 5 items plus 1 more, which is the BCLAD bonus. So there's actually 6 items on it. The motion would be to approve the early easy recommendations with the exception of number 4, so that Zoe can recuse herself, and then we'll come back to number 4. Would that work?
Yes, thank you. I make that motion.
So you're making a motion to approve the early easy recommendations with the addition of number 6, BCLAD bonus concept to be negotiated, with the exception of number 4.
Yes.
I second that.
Seconded by Trustee Asbury. Okay. Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. And no abstentions? All right, so now can we have a motion to approve item number 4 on the early easy recommendation list? This was to extend our partnerships with the City of Ukiah, Space, and the Boys and Girls Club through Summer School 2021. Can I have a motion for that?
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
Motion made by Trustee Nelson, seconded by Trustee Asbury. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, and abstentions?
I'm going to abstain.
And Trustee Fernandez is going to abstain.
Aye.
Okay. And for clarity, Trustee Fernandez is a member of the Space Board of Directors. Okay. So then I don't know if we need I don't know if this is a motion format, but maybe it is. Superintendent Cuban, would you like a motion to approve the budget framework, or is that an action item, do you think, or how would you like to approach that?
Yes, it would be nice to have a motion to approve the budget framework.
Okay, so the budget framework includes prioritizing four categories of expenditures: learning acceleration, facilities, general fund reserves, and future needs, specifically setting aside $2.5 million for ideas we haven't yet considered.
Well, I'll make a motion to approve the budget framework.
I second that.
Seconded by Trustee Barrett. Any comments before we vote? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions? Any no votes? Okay. Well, that was pretty easy. So Steve, will you just give us a kind of preview of how we're going to, how is this topic going to look to us in the future? How are you going to handle this moving forward? Or do you not know yet?
The next time you'll see budget numbers from us will be in June, when you see the initial budget for 2021-22. And that will include estimated actuals for 2021. And we'll make sure we bring in a couple slides, that maybe even keeping that first slide that showed the numbers, and show you how much of that is in the 2021 budget, how much is proposed for the 21-22 budget, and how much of it will be in the future years. And just so we can kind of start seeing it that way. But again, each time we do a budget presentation going forward, we'll have separate slides to talk about this. This is too big and too important to not really call it out and talk about it as part of each of those presentations.
Okay, I do think that I agree with you that that chart where we kind of see what's left in each fund, I think is important, just so we have the big picture view without going too deep into the details of it. And then it sounds like over time, because they all have different deadlines, some of these will fall away as the spending deadline is passed.
Great. And there might be more money to add to it soon too. Who knows? So it'll be interesting.
Okay, I would suggest that those of you who worked more closely on our bond might have some input here, but when we're going to do sort of a swap out of things that we had planned for the bond to pay for, but now we're going to be able to front load with additional money, I think we should be really transparent about that just so the community knows, but I'm not quite sure what that looks like, but I just wanted to put that out there. I don't think that's a problem. I think people will be happy because it will actually free up bond money for other projects, but I just think we should be clear when we're having the opportunity to preserve our bond money for additional ideas that maybe that we didn't even know we were going to be able to fund.
Right, that's great.
Okay, I think this is it. I think we're done, right? Okay, so Superintendent Cuban, you're muted if you're talking to us, but.
Yes, we are finished, but we are reconvening to closed session, and there's a different link that's sent to you for closed session.
Okay, and I'm assuming there was no public comment. I forgot to ask, but I think there was not.
Ian, is there public comment?
You do still have the consent agenda?
Oh, thank you.
I'm checking public comment now.
Okay, while Ian is doing that, can we have a motion to approve the consent agenda? This is the adoption of board policies that we had a chance to review at our last board meeting last week.
I so move.
Moved by trustee Nelson.
Second.
I heard B first, seconded by trustee Arkin. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any no votes? Okay, thank you. Consent agenda item is approved.
And we currently have no public comment.
Okay, so let's adjourn this this public. Trustee Nelson, you have a comment?
Can we take a 5-minute between the two meetings?
Yes, so let's reconvene at 6:31 for a closed